Camera one, camera two, camera one, camera two, camera two, camera two.
I think that this is camera one and that's camera two.
Oh, I'm sorry. Camera one, camera two. Good morning, everybody. Hope everybody's having a great Sunday. Super excited to have you here. Obviously, we just started to have some family reunions again. Last night was amazing. We got the opportunity to be at Temperance. These next 2 Sundays, we're going to be in Sylvania. I hope you guys are able to join us. If you haven't, there might be a few spots left. There might not be. I'm not supposed to say any of this on camera, but I'm talking anyway, so that's what we're doing. So let's do question of the day. Are you ready? Is everybody ready? I can't hear you. I can't see you. Ready to type? All right, here we go. So if you could only eat one fruit every day for the rest of your life, what would you pick and why? What would I pick? I know my son's pick. My son's pick would definitely be watermelon. I despise watermelon. It's actually the only food I don't like. Why? Because I don't, and this is weird. Anybody that knows me, I'm a total foodie and I love food, but for some reason, watermelon's only it. Like, it's the only thing I won't eat. Like, I'll eat sushi, I eat raw fish, I do a bunch of other substances that food-wise that would freak people out, like pickled things, but watermelon. Gags me? I don't know. Real story though, this is a true Aaron Kent story. My wife had gotten these wonderful strawberry lemonades from like one of the fruit markets, and then in the middle of it was watermelon. And if you look at both colors, they look the same. So I literally grabbed the watermelon one and took a big mouthful and was like, oh no, I've had the watermelon, and it ruined me. I was like, I wanted to gag and die. But she thought it was hilarious because she's like, oh, you had one of the watermelon ones? I was like, I thought they were all the same. Fruit I like, I really like strawberries, and I really like, what are the baby oranges? Cuties. Yeah, are those mandarin tangerines, whatever the, clementine jobbies? I like those. I could eat a whole bag of those. I think now, that'd probably be my go-to. We had a vegan friend. Woo! Woo!
Ask and you shall receive.
Thank you. Everybody, if you could, stand up. If you're in a car, don't stand up. We're gonna stand for worship. Have a good morning, guys.
I was lost, but he brought me Blessed are all who fear the Lord, who walk in obedience to him. You will eat the fruit of your labor. Blessings and prosperity will be yours. Your wife will be like a fruitful vine within your house. Your children will be like olive shoots around your table. Yes, this will be the blessing for the man who fears the Lord. May the Lord bless you from Zion. May you see the prosperity of Jerusalem all the days of your life. May you live to see your children's children. Peace be on Israel.
The Lord bless you and keep you, make his face shine upon you and be gracious towards you. The Lord turn his face towards you and give you peace. The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face shine upon you and be gracious towards you. The Lord turn his face towards you and give you peace. Every single night, I think for the last month or so, I have prayed those prayers over my kids when I put them to bed to go to sleep. When I talk Lola and Nora and Eden in, I say that to them every single night. The Lord bless you and keep you, make his face shine upon you and be gracious towards you. The Lord turn his face towards you and give you peace. Every single night for the last 6 weeks, I have prayed those prayers over my kids because that's what I want, right? That's what I want. Like most of you parents who are watching, I want the Lord to bless my kids and keep them. But can I tell you a little bit of a secret, Summer City? And you got to promise not to tell anybody, okay? So this is just between me and you guys who are watching right now, okay? And Shannon and Liz, because they're in the room. And anybody else that you share this post with ends up watching it, and anybody else that watches on YouTube later or whatever else. But other than that, that's it. It's just between me and you guys. Please don't tell anyone I said this, because this is not a good look for your pastor. Every single night I pray that for my kids. But you guys ready for this? I have no idea what it means. Okay, I'm serious. Like, I have no idea what it means for God to bless my kids. And the reason I don't know what it means for God to bless my kids is because I don't really know what it means for somebody to be blessed by God. Even though every time someone sneezes around me, I say, God bless you, I have no idea what it means, right? Even though it's hard for me to send an email back to someone without saying, God bless, at the end of it, I have no idea what it means. Even though sometimes when I post stuff on Instagram, like, you know, me hanging out with Toby Mac, and I don't want people to think I'm bragging. Even though I'm bragging, I put hashtag blessed in the comments, right? Even though every single night for 6 weeks, I said to my kids, I prayed over my kids, the Lord bless you and keep you, make his face shine upon you and be gracious towards you and give you peace. I don't really know what it means for God to bless my kids. And that, Soma City, is why your friendly neighborhood Nigerian pastor was not a happy camper when Pastor Ryan, who oversees our teaching, told me that I was going to be preaching out of Psalm 128. I was not a happy camper because the first time I read Psalm 128, I noticed that the psalmist kept talking about blessing. Okay, I don't know if you noticed or not, when Miss Nora, after worship, was reading Psalm 128, over and over and over again, the psalmist uses the word blessed. And that's our word of the day, by the way, for those of you who like a word of the day. If anybody likes a word of the day, the word of the day is the word blessed. I'm going to read to you guys again Psalm 128. I'm going to start in verse 1, and I'm going to read all 6 verses, but we're going to do something a little bit different today. As I read it, we're going to play a game. Psalm 128, we're going to play a game. That's what I was going to say. Okay, here's what we're going to do. All right, our word of the day, like I said, is the word blessed. And so anytime you see the word, I want you to count. Okay, I want you to count. You can count out loud. I want you to see in the comments, because obviously I can't hear you guys. And so I'm going to ask you at the very end how many times he says the word blessed or use a form of it. And so anytime I read this and you see the word blessed, I want you to do it in the comments. And I know we've said this before, but I'll say it again in case you missed it. The reason we ask you guys to be engaged, to comment, to share, is not because, you know, we get together on Monday and we're like, yay, look at all the comments. No, the reason we do that is because we want you to be engaged. And the reason we want you to be engaged is because the more engaged you are in the conversation, the more engaging the conversation is to your heart, okay? And I don't know if anybody else does this, but literally every single Sunday in my house, my wife is doing that right now. She has notes, and she is taking notes. When I'm speaking, when Pastor Ryan is speaking, every Sunday, I don't know what she does with the notes, but she is taking notes, and she is leaning in. And we've said this before, when we engage, when we lean in, when we take notes, when we comment, when we say amen, when we repeat things back, it sticks longer in our heart, okay? Not really the sermon, but we're going to play that game. When you see the word, I want you to just count in the comments, and at the very end, we're going to see how many of you guys played along, okay? And the rest of you, we're going to pray for you later. Okay, Psalm 128, verse 1. Listen to what the psalmist says. Blessed, he says, okay, so I'm going to give you a bonus in the game. That's like the first one, okay? All right, that's number one. You guys should be commenting. There's one right there in the comments, okay? Blessed, he said, are all who fear the Lord, who walk in obedience to him. You will eat, he says, the fruit of your labor. Blessings and prosperity will be yours. Your wife will be like a fruitful vine within your house. Your children will be like olive shoots around your table. Yes, this will be the blessing for the man who fears the Lord. May the Lord bless you from Zion. May you see the prosperity of Jerusalem all the days of your life. May you live to see your children's children. Peace be on Israel. Game over, pens down. How many times did the psalmist use a form of the word blessed in this passage? How many times? Okay, put it in the comments. Are you guys counting? Liz and Shannon, do you know? You are not playing the game. They were not playing the game. Hopefully you guys at home are better than these two and you guys are counting and playing along. It's 4 times, right? That's 4 times in 6 verses. The psalmist uses the word blessed. 4 times he tells us that a man who fears the Lord, and again, not really the sermon, but just so you know, fearing the Lord in this context is not so much, hey, I'm afraid that God's going to smite me. Fearing the Lord is living in awe of God. It's having a proper view of God that sees his holiness and his bigness, and you're just like, wow, I can't believe that I get to have a relationship with you, that I get to talk to you. That's what it means to fear the Lord. And 4 times in 6 verses, the psalmist tells us that when we have this view of God, then when we live in awe of God, and when we see God for who he is, and we walk in response to that, our lives are blessed. Now, I don't know about anyone else, but my first reaction when I read a passage like this is I'm like, I want in, right? I'm like, I want in on the blessing. But what I realized when I first started digging into this narrative here is that even though I wanted in on the blessing, I'm not really sure that I knew what I was standing in line for. It's sort of like what happened, I don't know, about 4 to 5 weeks ago. I showed up early in front of GameStop in the mall, and I stood in line. These guys are shaking their head behind the camera. You guys can judge me. It's okay. The Lord sees my heart. I stood up in line because I wanted to pre-order a PlayStation 5. They only had limited quantities, and I wanted to get in on it. And so I stood in line, 15 minutes before it started. And I was waiting for them to open so I could go buy what I wanted to buy. And it was so interesting, I'm telling you guys, to see how people responded to us. Like, people were walking by, and they saw us standing in line before the store opened, all the mall walkers. And I don't know this for sure, but I'm pretty sure that the couple that stood behind me stood in line not because they wanted a PlayStation 5. I think they stood in line just because they saw us standing in line, and they figured we were standing in line for something exciting, and they just stood in line. Again, I didn't ask, so I don't know, but the way they were asking questions and their posture, I'm like, y'all are just standing in line because you walked by and you saw people standing in line, and you figured there was a good reason why they're standing in line. And I share that story with you guys because I feel like that's what most of us do when we read passages like this and we hear words like blessing, right? I feel like when we read stuff like this, we're like, I'm in, right? I want the blessing of God. I want God to bless me. But the truth is, most of us don't really know what we mean when we say that. And what I love about Psalm 128 is the psalmist doesn't just invite us to be a part of a life that is blessed, but he shows us exactly what it means when God blesses your life. And fam, I'm going to just tell you right now before we dive into this narrative here, that by the time we're done today and next week, we're going to split up the conversation into 2 parts, right? There is a really, really good chance that you will get really uncomfortable the next time you sneeze and someone says, God bless you. You're going to go, I'm not so sure that I want God to bless me. The next time you get an email from me saying, God bless, you're going to go, Sammy, I don't know anymore if I want God to bless me, because what the psalmist says blessing looks like from God is oftentimes not what most of us think when we think of blessing. So we're going to jump in again, starting in verse 1. He says this, blessed, he said, are all who fear the Lord, who walk in obedience with him. And this is where we're going to set up camp for most of our conversation today, and then we're going to pick it up next week. And it says in verse 2, it says, you, speaking of the people who fear the Lord, who are blessed, will eat the fruit of your labor. Blessings and prosperity, the psalmist says, will be yours. You guys ever read a verse in the Bible sometimes and just think to yourself, you're like, man, if they would just take out a few words from that verse, it would be perfect. Okay, anybody do that? Am I the only one that sometimes reads a verse and we're like, oh man, it was so close to being perfect? Can I show you what I'm talking about? Let me show you what the verse says, and then let me show you what I wish it says to make it more perfect. Here's what the verse says, talking about what it looks like to be blessed. It says this. It says that you will eat the fruit of your labor, right? So when you're blessed, you're going to eat the fruit of your labor. That's what the verse says. Okay, this is what I wish the verse says. I wish the verse says you will eat fruit. Okay, anybody with me? I mean, show of hands if you're like, man, I like the verse way better if it just stopped at fruit. To say, okay, man, if you fear God, God's going to bless you, and guess what? You are going to eat fruit. But that's not what the verse says, right? The verse says that you will do what? It says that you will eat the fruit of your labor. Let me make this a little bit practical for us. Over the next 2 weeks, we're going to be talking specifically about 3 ways that God's blessing looks nothing like what we think it does. 3 ways that God's blessing is different from what most of us think it is. And here is the first one. And this is not an exhaustive list, but I think it's a start to a conversation that will redefine what most of us think of when we think of God blessing us, or when we think of what it means to have a blessed life. 3 different ways that God's blessing is different than what we think it is. And here is the first one. God's blessing, if you have a pen, write this down. You got a phone, put it in your phone, tweet it, whatever you want to do to remember so it sticks. God's blessing is far more about fruit than comfort. I'm going to say that again. God's blessings, biblically speaking, and in context of this passage, is far more about fruit than comfort. Let me put it a different way. God's blessing is far more about a life that is fruitful than a life that is easy. Let me put it a different way. God's blessing looks more like God playing the role of a gardener than it does God playing the role of Xzibit. Anybody know who Xzibit the rapper is? If you are in the comments, just say, do you know who Xzibit the rapper is? Yeah, Pimp My Ride. Yeah, so Xzibit, for those of you who know, is known for 2 things. He's a rapper, but Xzibit was, how do you know Pimp My Ride? That is like way beyond, okay, you had older brothers. That makes sense. I was like, how does Liz know that? Okay, so Xzibit was a rapper, and he hosted the show called Pimp My Ride. Okay, am I allowed to say pimp? They're like, I don't know if I'm allowed to say the word pimp on camera because I'm a pastor on camera. So if I'm not, look it up later, Liz, you can bleep the words, just kind of make it faded or whatever, But for those of you who don't know what the show is, man, it was an incredible show, show by MTV, and the show basically was these guys, it featured people that had just the worst cars imaginable, okay? So it would be somebody, Bob, and look at Bob's car, and his car is terrible, right? He's got a hole the size of Texas, in the floor of his car, like he can put his foot on the ground from inside his car. His door's gone, his windshield smashed, he drives like Ace Ventura. I mean, just these guys with the worst cars that you can imagine, and then enter Xzibit, right? Xzibit would show up and knock on their door, and they would freak out, and then they would show Xzibit just how bad their car is, and Xzibit would take their car, and he would promise to do what? To pimp their ride, right? And I looked it up. on Wikipedia, and I just want to read to you, right, the description of what happens when Xzibit takes your car to pimp your ride, okay? And by the way, this is why you guys should be way more excited when Pastor Ryan speaks than when I speak. When Pastor Ryan speaks, he reads you quotes from really brilliant theologians about God and life and philosophy. When I speak, I read you Wikipedia quotes of Pimp My Ride, okay? Check this out. Here's what it said. It says, each car is a custom pimp, tailored to the personality and the interests of the owner. You're going to have a lot to bleep in here if I'm not allowed to say that. I really don't know. I should have checked that. For example, so these are some examples of some of the things. Again, he takes the crappiest cars and just goes over the top. And here are some examples, and some of you, if you've seen these, just let us know in the comments. These are some of the things that Xzibit did. One time, and I remember seeing this one, okay? He took there was a guy that was a bowler, and he installed a ball spinner inside his trunk. Okay, this guy had the crappiest car, and Exhibit pimped his ride, and when you open his trunk, there was a ball spinner there for all of his bowling balls. There's another example. There was a badminton player that had a badminton net installed in the back of his Dodge Caravan. I don't even know what that means. That sounds not practical at all, but sounds awesome. And then listen to this. There was a surfer that got a clothes dryer in the back of his VW Type 2. How amazing is that? And then at one time they installed an electric fireplace in the trunk of a vehicle. And he says this, the work that Exhibit did usually included new paint, accessories, chrome tires, rims, internal electronics. That was always the best part for me. It was the TV screen. I was like, wow, you got a TV screen in your car that's bigger than the one that you have in your living room. That is amazing. DVD players, video games, large screen TVs, and other cutting edge accessories. At the end of the show, the car is revealed to its owner, as well as all the details of the renovation and the custom features. In addition, the participant is usually given a gift that somehow relates to the car or the owner's lobby. Exhibit pimps their ride. I don't know about anybody else in here that grew up in church and did the whole Sunday school and VBS thing, but that's what I was expecting when I said yes to Jesus. Anybody with me? Like when I went up, and by the way, if you're watching this and maybe, you're new to the whole Jesus thing, or maybe you're not into the whole Jesus thing, I just want you to know that you have it easy, okay? Today, and we're going to do that in a little bit, when we give you an invitation to follow Jesus, we're like, all right, just text, believe to 474747. I mean, how amazing is that you're going to text that number and someone on our team is going to reach out to you and they're going to sit down with you and explain to you what it means to follow Jesus Christ, and it's going to be the first day of the greatest adventure you've ever been on. That's what it looks like a lot of times today to say yes to Jesus. But when I grew up in church, okay, there was no text believe. When I grew up in church, you had to come up to the altar, okay? You had to come to the front and you had to walk in a line and you got to stand in line, okay? And there was no Instagram, so it's not like you could take a selfie of yourself and at least get some likes. Like people are like, wow, look, no. It was just you standing there waiting in line for the pastor to pray over you because you wanted to say yes to Jesus. And I remember doing that when I was 7 years old. Right? And I remember just walking up and standing in line at Vacation Bible School. I can picture the room right now, and Just As I Am is blaring in the background. And I'm just like, I'm going to say yes to Jesus. And I remember walking up there and saying, okay, Jesus, I want to follow you, and opening my hands as a gesture of saying, okay, God, I want the new life that you gave me. Again, I don't know what you were thinking if you did that. I don't know what anybody else in line was thinking when they did that. When I did that, one of the biggest reasons I did that is because I was hoping that God would take my crappy life, which I didn't think my life was that crappy when I was 7, but apparently the preacher said my life was crappy and I was going to HE double hockey sticks and I didn't want that. And so I went up to the stage, partly afraid and partly excited because God was going to take my okay, crappy life and he was going to replace it with a blessed life. The same way that Exhibit will take your crappy car and replace it with a pimped out life. I'm like, all right, God, here's my old life. Now I am waiting for you to give me a pimped out, blessed life. And while God did, in fact, give me a better and a blessed life, what I didn't see coming is that Jesus giving me a better and a blessed life did not mean that life was going to get any easier. Right? What I didn't see coming, what I didn't know, what nobody told me, is that when it comes to following Jesus, God blessing our lives is far more about fruit than it is comfort. It's far more about fruit than it is living an easy life that's free of troubles. And I got to be honest with you guys, I had a really, really hard time when I figured that out. And I still do. Right? Just 2 days ago, I called a pastor friend of mine and we talked on the phone for 45 minutes. And at the end of it, I realized that part of the reason I'm struggling is because deep down inside of me, there's still a part of me that struggles with this idea that following Jesus does not make my life easier. That following Jesus does not make my life more comfortable. That Jesus cares far more about a fruitful life than he does a comfortable life. I love the way Jesus put it in one of his most famous sermons in Matthew chapter 5. If you don't know, if you've never heard before, it's called the Sermon on the Mount. It's probably the most viral sermon of Jesus compared to all the other sermons. Everybody on YouTube has watched it. It's absolutely incredible. I just want to read it to you guys. Listen to how Jesus frames this idea of not only following him, but listen to what Jesus says a blessed life look like. It's the Sermon on the Mount, Matthew chapter 5. I'm going to read it to you starting in verse 3. Jesus is preaching, and listen to what Jesus says. Jesus says this. He says, blessed, he said. There's our word of the day. If you want to keep counting, you can keep counting. There's a lot of them in the passage that we're about to read. Listen to what he says. He says, blessed, Jesus says, are the poor in spirit. And everybody said, that makes no sense, right? I mean, come on. It makes no sense. I mean, come on, be honest. Okay, how many of you think blessed and you think poor? Right? Nobody, right? I mean, if anything, the opposite of poor is blessed, right? And we're going to talk more about this next week, but somehow Jesus had a different, apparently, just meaning to this word blessed. And so Jesus is preaching this sermon, and I wasn't there. I wish I was there to see the reaction in their faces when Jesus said blessed, and they're all like, ah, and it's like, are the poor in spirit? And they're like, oh, man. Right? It's like those two things, Jesus, shouldn't go together, but somehow Jesus puts them together. Jesus says, blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Verse 4, blessed, here's our word again, are those who mourn. Really? Really? That doesn't make any sense. For they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek. For real? For they will inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. Blessed, he said, are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for they will see God. I don't know about that. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called the children of God. Check this out. Verse 10. Blessed, he said, are those who are persecuted. I don't know about that, Jesus. Because of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Now listen to what it says in verse 11. Blessed are you. Okay, this is Jesus. Imagine you were there in the Sermon on the Mount, sitting down, got your laptop, got your iPad, you're taking notes. It's Jesus. You know it's going to be a fire sermon. You're trying to just keep up with everything he says. And he says, you want to be blessed? And you're like, oh, I want to be blessed. That's why I'm here. And he says, blessed are you when, he says, people insult you, persecute you, and falsely say all kinds of evil against you because of me. Friends, this is another great example of one of those places where you wish Jesus would have just like left out a certain word, right? He says, blessed are you when, not if, when. So it's going to happen. If Jesus said if, I would have been like, okay, great. Then it doesn't really apply to me. He was, no. He's saying, no, it's both. Jesus says, blessed are you, right, when people insult you, when people persecute you, when people falsely say all kinds of evil against you. Not because you're a troll, not because you're a jerk. No, because of me, because you're following me. When that happens, Jesus says, I want you to know that you are blessed. All right, can I dress this for you in 2020 clothes? All right, can I put it in context for you? Okay, this would be like Jesus telling you today. Imagine if Jesus were walking the face of the earth today, and Jesus is telling you, he's like, hey, I just want you to know that when you shoot me a text, so imagine that you have Jesus' text and you're going to shoot him a text. Imagine that you text Jesus and you're going, Jesus, man, I'm just having a rough day. And he's like, tell me about it. You're like, it's rough. It's just, I'm just not doing good because, there's people, I'm just trying to follow God and people keep persecuting me and they keep insulting me, right? And they're saying all kinds of bad stuff about me and it's not true and it's just all kinds of rumors and gossip and I'm just having a hard time. And Jesus is saying right here, I just want you to know that when you send me that text, this is the text I'm going to send back to you. Are you ready? Wow, you are so blessed. Followed by a gift of Denzel going, my man. Right? Followed by another text saying, hey man, you want to meet at QQ at 3 o'clock so we can celebrate how blessed you are. Hashtag blessed. Blessed are you, Jesus says. Do you believe that? When people insult you, when they persecute you, when they say all kinds of things against you. Why? Because of me. And then he says this in verse 12. He says this. He says, rejoice and be glad. And this is the why. This is why you're blessed. Because great is your reward in heaven. For in the same way they persecuted the prophets who were before you. This is not really a sermon about persecution, but here's the big idea. Don't miss the big idea in this conversation. Don't miss the big idea in Jesus' sermon. The big idea of what Jesus is saying here is that the blessing of following Jesus is not that we don't go through hardship or that we don't get persecuted or that life is not hard. What Jesus is saying is that the blessing of following Jesus is that we get to live a life that bears fruit. The blessing of following Jesus is that God will take all of the hardship and all of the persecution and all of the labor that we go through, and he will use it to bear fruit now and in eternity. The blessing of following Jesus is that we get to live lives that bear fruit in spite of the persecution, in spite of the trouble, and in spite of the hardship. Blessed are you, Jesus says, when all these things happen to you. Why? Because great is your reward in heaven. What Jesus is saying here, if you're not catching it, is this. This is so good. Here's what Jesus is saying. Don't miss this. What Jesus is saying is, hey, if you knew the fruit that your life was going to bear in the future, you would consider yourself blessed today in spite of the hardship that you're going through. Let me say that again. If you knew the fruit that your life will bear in the future, you would consider yourself blessed today in spite of the hardship that you are going through. And what I love about Matthew 5 is Jesus doesn't just tell us that our reward is great in heaven and there's a fruit to come. I love that he backs it up by connecting it to the Old Testament saints that most of the people he was preaching to consider the most blessed people on earth. Did you catch that at the end of verse 12? He says, rejoice and be glad. He says, great is your reward in heaven. And here's why. For in the same way they persecuted the prophets who were before you. In hindsight, most of us and most of the listeners of Jesus when he preached this sermon would agree that the Old Testament prophets were blessed, right? But only in hindsight. Is it just me, or does anyone else find it interesting that the people that you and I would consider the most blessed in the scriptures probably didn't feel blessed for most of their lives? Can you just think about that? Isn't that interesting that the people that we would look back in hindsight at their stories, all the Old Testament saints, and we go, wow, those people were, wow, man, talk about God's favor, right? God's favor was on them, obviously, and God blessed their lives. Isn't it interesting that most of those people probably did not feel blessed by God for most of their lives? Let me give you a couple examples. Joseph is a great example. Question: do you think that Joseph felt blessed most of his life? I mean, just think about that. Like, how many times do you think Joseph used hashtag blessed? Because, like, man, I am just blessed. Man, you should hear my story. You should see how much God has blessed me. Right? If Joseph went on the Family Feud and Steve Harvey was like, hey, Joseph, we interviewed 100 people and we told them to give us, top words that describe your life, my guess is blessed would not make the top 500, much less the top 10. Right? Blessed is not a word that Joseph would have used to describe his life. And I wasn't there, but I wonder how Joseph would have responded. I wonder how Joseph would have responded if someone came up to him and said, Joseph, if you could see the fruit that your life will bear in Genesis chapter 50, you would consider yourself blessed in Genesis chapter 40 when you were forgotten in prison. Right? What about Moses? You think he felt blessed? I wonder how Moses would have responded if someone would have come to him at the beginning of the story and said, Moses, I know it's not easy leading the nation of Israel out of Egypt. I know they're a stiff-necked people and they're giving you all kinds of trouble and you've grown more gray hairs in the last 3 days than you did in the last 30 years. I know it's not easy. But Moses, if you could just see the fruit that God was going to bear through this nation, you would consider yourself blessed. Esther, I know that you are just a woman and a slave in a time in the world where it was not great to be a woman, much less a slave that is a woman. And I know that this is hard. And I know that you're in a tough place. But Esther, if you could see the fruit, okay, if you could see the fruit in the future, if you could see all the moms, okay, and this is just a sliver of the fruit, if you could just see all of the moms who are going to name their kids after you hundreds and thousands of years later, you would consider yourself blessed. Mary, I know this was not the plan. I know an unplanned pregnancy was not your plan. You're just a teenager. I know your plan was not to take your newborn baby and go run and hide as a refugee in a foreign land. I know that's not how you thought motherhood was going to go. But Mary, if you could just see the fruit that God was going to bring from the life of this child and you being this child's mother, you would consider yourself blessed. Sammy, if you could just see, right? I know that, you're just an immigrant from a third world country, don't know a whole lot of people. I see you sitting in the computer lab in the student union, sobbing your eyes out because you just got an email from an uncle of yours, the only person that you knew in the state of Ohio, just told you that you were crazy for saying yes to following Jesus instead of chasing the American dream. And they just cut off all ties with you. And you're sitting in the computer lab and you're just weeping and you're just crying and you feel forsaken. You feel alone. You feel like there's no dream and there's no plan. And God has just left you where he is. And you are just sitting there not sure where to go. I know it's not easy, but man, if you could see the fruit that God will bear 10, 15, 20 years later, you will stand on the table in the computer lab in the student union and you would do the wobble, even though the wobble had not been released yet, and you would consider yourself blessed. Friends, I don't know what season of life you find yourself in. I don't know what struggles you're carrying. I don't know how you would describe the state of your life right now, but I am telling you, if you could see the fruit that God is going to bear in your life 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now, in eternity, you would consider yourself the most blessed person in the state of Ohio. And not only would you consider yourself blessed, but you would say yes every single day to the journey of walking in obedience with Jesus. And that, SC fam, is ultimately the invitation the psalmist is making. Right? The invitation the psalmist is making is not only just an invitation to live a blessed life, it's an invitation to continue to walk in obedience with God, because he knows that continuous walk in obedience with God leads to a blessed and fruitful life. I'm going to read it again, Psalm 128, verse 1 and 2. Blessed, he says, are all who fear the Lord, who walk in obedience to him. You, he said, will eat the fruit of your labor. Blessing and prosperity will be yours. There's so much in these verses that we're going to break down next week. Part of what the psalmist is saying here is that when we walk in obedience to God, we are blessed. And when God blesses us, that looks far more like fruit than it does comfort or ease or any other thing that most of us think that it means to be blessed by God. A couple hours before I had to preach this sermon, I asked Shannon if she would go to the store and buy me some fruit, and she did. and she got me this nice looking fruit here. And since Liz was here, or Liz went to, I said, hey, Liz, can you do me a favor? I want you to do some research for me. I want you to do a little research about what it took to get the fruit from wherever the fruit came from to the store, right? And so Shannon and Liz went to the store. They went to Walmart, I believe, and they got this fruit, and it's good fruit, and it looks good. And we eat fruit every day in my house. We make our kids eat fruit every single day because fruit is good. But I think what most of us don't ever consider when it comes to fruit and when we eat fruit is what it takes for the fruit to get to the store. We just think, man, I'm just going to pull up in the store and get the best fruit I can get. I don't know if you know this or not, but they don't grow the fruit at Kroger or Walmart, right? They don't got a fruit thing in the back. They're like, okay, let's just go get some grapes and get some out. That's not what happens. There's a long, long process to get in the fruit to the store. And so Liz did a little bit of research for me here, and I'm just going to read it to you. And it's really long and it's really boring, but you can blame Liz for that. But that's kind of the point. But these are some of the processes that goes to getting the fruit to the table. Listen, pruning. You got to prune. Pruning is a highly skilled vineyard practice, right? The purpose of pruning is to guide the vine in certain directions. Anybody know this? I didn't know any of this. You guide the vine in certain directions and for particular purposes, right? In Napa Valley, much of the work is done by vineyard workers who are year-round employees. So all year, there are people right now who are pruning. And then there's the bud break, right? The first tender buds of a growing season emerge from the dormant vine during the bud break. This is so boring, Liz, but thank you. That's the point. Depending on the vine variety and the vineyard location, bud break can take over 2 months. So for 2 months, these guys are breaking the bud. I don't know what that means, but they've got to do it so I can get my grapes. And then there's flowering. After a month or so of the vegetative growth, a vine would develop tight bunches of tiny flowers. And then there's a fruit set. As these little grapes grow, bunches begin to take their familiar shape. And then there's a crop thinning, often called the green harvesting. Crop thinning refers to the dropping of unripe grape branches that are not perfect, which may not be developed into an even pattern. And then there is the harvest, right? And the harvest takes how long? The harvest takes 3 months. Here's the point. There is an often long and unglamorous process to get to this, right? It's not on Instagram. No one's liking it. No one's watching what is it called again? The bud break on YouTube. Nobody cares. But it's a long process. And in the same way that it's a long and unglamorous process to get to this, the psalmist is reminding us in Psalm 128 that though the journey of walking in obedience with Jesus and following him every day can be long and unglamorous, it will lead to this. Psalm 128 is our encouragement to keep showing up and to keep walking every single day. It's not glamorous. It's not going to show up on Instagram. Nobody's going to care 99.99% of the time. But the psalmist is saying to you and I, you keep walking. The more you walk with Jesus, the more blessed you are. And when God blesses you, it doesn't mean that your life is going to be easy. When God blesses you, it means that your life will be fruitful. Blessed, he says, is the man who fears the Lord, who walk in obedience with him. So let's keep walking, saints. Right? Let's keep walking. That's what the psalmist, let's keep walking. Let's keep showing up. Let's keep trusting. Let's keep planting. Mom, Mary, just keep showing up. Because it's going to lead to fruit. Dads, employees, bosses, wherever you are, whatever season of life that you are in, God is saying, will you keep showing up and will you keep walking? When we fear the Lord and when we walk in obedience to him, we are blessed. And that blessing looks far more like fruit than it does comfort. What does it look like for you today to continue to walk in obedience to Jesus? Next week, we're going to talk practically about what this looks like, and we're going to talk a little bit more holistically about what it looks like to have a blessed life, what it looks like to be blessed and to be a blessing. But today, I just want to challenge your perspective of what it means to be blessed. I just want to give you a perspective change to how you view your life. Today, most of us, if we're honest, feel like the lives that we're living right now, especially in the midst of a pandemic, is mundane at best. I just do the same thing over and over again. Most of us don't feel like we're changing anything or making any difference. Most of us probably feel like Joseph did most of his life. And God just wants to remind you today that you keep walking in obedience, and it will lead to fruit. And if you could see the fruit ahead of you, you would consider yourself so blessed today. I love the way the late, great Eugene Peterson summarizes this. He says it's a long obedience in the same direction. Right? That is like the worst title to a book ever. Right? When Ryan told me about that book, I was like, oh, that sounds terrible. I don't want a long, I want a viral obedience. I want to do it now and I want to see fruit now. But Eugene Peterson says following Jesus is a long obedience in the same direction. And it's saying I'm going to keep showing up every single day in the mundane, trusting that the God who began this work will bring it to a completion, trusting that I am blessed and that blessing will lead to a fruitful life. If you're watching this and you have not began a walk with Jesus, normally we do this after worship, but I'm going to do it now because I don't want you to turn off. If you're like, I don't even know if I'm walking with Jesus, I want to just invite you today to join the rest of us. Oftentimes it's going to look boring and it's not glamorous, and I'm going to tell you what I wish they told me when I was 7 and I stood in line. Jesus is not going to make your life easier, but following Jesus will make your life better. And better means that you get to live a fruitful and blessed life. If you've never taken that steps to follow Jesus, I want to invite you to just pray this prayer with me that we invite people to pray almost every Sunday. Jesus, I believe, and I give you my life. Just say those words. Jesus, I believe, and I give you my life. It's not the whole conversation you and Jesus need to have, but it's the beginning of the rest of your life. Jesus, I believe. Just sit and I give you my life. I believe what I believe, that you died on the cross for my sin. And I believe that you can save me from my sin. I believe and I give you my life. If you prayed that prayer, like I said earlier, we'd love to hear from you. Just text BELIEVE to 4747747. You don't have to come and stand in line and awkwardly talk to a pastor. But if you text us, we'd love to follow up with you. I'm going to pray for us. We'll sing one more song, and I'll be back to close us. Jesus, thank you for calling us. Thank you for blessing us. It's not what I think it is, and it's not what I thought I was going to get in line, but it's better. And I thank you that you don't just come to improve our lives, but you come to give us a brand new life. I thank you for the privilege of following you. I thank you that we get to live fruitful lives. And I pray by your grace that we would continue to show up, continue to trust, God, that you are good, and like a good gardener, God, that soon enough we will see fruit in all of our lives. I pray for all of my friends today who are discouraged by life, who are weighed down by the burdens of life. God, will you be the great comforter? You said, blessed are those who mourn, for we will be comforted. And so I pray in this moment that you would comfort us in a way that only you can. And so we sing this next song, God, not just because that's what we do, but as the prayer of our hearts, God, that we would be a community of people who are truly blessed by you, and that we would live in light of that reality. In Jesus' name, amen. Let's worship together.
May his favor be upon you and 1,000 generations, and your family, and your children, and their children, and their children. May his presence go before you and behind you and beside you, all around you and within you. He is with you, he is with you in the morning, in the evening, and you're coming and you're going, and you're weeping and rejoicing. He's for you, he is 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 for you. Amen,
So I'm sure most of you noticed we only made it through 2 verses out of Psalm 128, but that's because we're going to finish the rest next week. And so I'd love for you to be a part of that conversation, to join us as we continue to talk about what it means to be blessed by God. And until then, hopefully I'll see you guys at a family reunion that's happening next Sunday. Are you going to see me before I see you guys? I don't know. The days are confusing. But either way, I hope you come to a family reunion. If you haven't signed up for one yet, we'd love to see you there. I love you guys. And until then, the Lord bless you and keep you, make his face shine upon you, and be gracious towards you. The Lord turn his face towards you and give you peace. I love you guys. See ya.
Like just where I'm just like, you gotta, yeah, that's not, that was the, up here, hello.
I don't know why I didn't.
You can look at me. More importantly, you have to look at me. You ready? Oh, it's so, hold on, maybe I can left hand. If you can throw it, I'd be like, and I love fruit, and it's ready. Yes. Yeah. Don't look at the camera. Look at me. You look at me. You ready? Oh my God. It's just gone so poorly. All right, never mind. Yeah, hi. I caught my orange.
Hey, that's not funny. I was gonna say Pastor Sammy here, but I hate that, so I'm not gonna do that. Another one. Hey, what's up, guys? I got fruit. Try to keep what?
Start from the beginning and stop when you feel like.
Weston, can you stand with 1 foot off the rug? Thanks. You don't have to go that far.
Where is that coming from?
You just need 1 foot off the rug. It's not your whole body.